Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to be talking about something that's been very hot in the art community here on YouTube, and that is art block. But I'm actually going to be talking about the psychological side of art block. So before we get into the topic, I'll just tell you about what I'm drawing. So this is just an ink sketch to test out a new ink that my husband bought for me for my birthday. It is Black Cat Waterproof India ink, and I haven't tested to see if it's waterproof. I've just used it for this sketch. I really like it though. It flows really well. I did notice that it has some shading, but nothing too bad. I am wanting to try out some different inks, but definitely this is really nice. I love how smooth it is, and I just drew a witch in the spirit of Halloween. I'm not really doing Inktober this year, so maybe this is just my little ode to Inktober, doing a little ink sketch. So, well, let's jump right in. So, the psychology of art blocks. Does art block exist? Well, no, it doesn't. There's no psychological term called art block. That's the short answer. But it's actually much more complex than that. Just because there's no scientific or psychological term for art block, that doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't exist. It actually hasn't been studied. Creativity is kind of a taboo thing to be studied in the scientific community because it almost takes out the mysticism of the creative mind. But I really hope that they do more research on creativity. That way we have a deeper understanding of these things. So a lot of what I'm going to say is opinion, as well as some research that I have done, and it wasn't extensive research. It was just, online kind of reading about different things to kind of figure out why do we commonly have this feeling called art block, especially if it doesn't really have a name in the psychological and scientific community. So art block may have never really been studied. However, writer's block has, and writer's block essentially is the same thing as artist block, just for a creative writer. And I guess we should kind of define what art block is. So personally, to me, I feel like art block is a desire to draw, but a lack of the ability to do so, and it has to cause some sort of distress. I know that's really vague, but I feel that the criteria for it should be you want to draw, you find yourself unable to or can't seem to do something well enough to your liking. It has to have been going on for a period of time. I feel like maybe a day is a little too short, but maybe in the 4, 5, 6 day range, I feel like then it's like you're actually feeling blocked, but I guess it could be shorter than that. And then the distress. I feel like that is a big part of it. If you just can't draw that day and it doesn't bother you, I feel like that's not quite an art block. So that's how I personally define it. If you guys define it as something different, make sure you let me know in the comments what you guys think art block is. I would really be interested in knowing how other people perceive it, because like I said, this is just my view and the things that I have personally looked into and read. Okay, moving on. So writer's block. We're gonna kind of assume that writer's block and artist block are generally the same thing. So writer's block was first used, the term writer's block was first used in the 1940s. I believe it was 1947, and then there were studies around it in the 70s and 80s. So that's really interesting that writer's block was something that was studied. And it is generally believed that there's neurological associations with this block. So it is suggested that during writer's block, or I'm just going to say creative block, during a creative block, the brain switches from processing with the cerebral cortex to the limbic system. And for those of you that don't know what that means, the cerebral cortex is a part of your brain that controls creative problem solving and it's like your creative mind. When this turns off and it switches to the limbic system, it's significantly harder for the brain to solve even simple problems that you otherwise could have solved very easily. The limbic system is the part of the brain that is very instinctual. It kind of is the fight or flight part of your brain. If you think about it that way, it's kind of easier to understand where you go from being creative and then all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, why can't I draw? But it could have been that your brain, for whatever reason, generally it's going to be stress, switched over to that limbic system, and you're now in that fight or flight where you're like, oh my gosh, I can't do this. So you kind of just want to get away. That's generally what is thought to be the cause. So psychological causes. So that was the neurological cause that is thought to control those creative blocks. But there are also psychological causes. So the psychological causes are the fear of amounting to previous success, fear of not being noticed or not being good enough, fear of being imperfect or doing poorly and someone noticing, being overwhelmed by the vastness of the creation. You're essentially like, you get to create a whole new world, and it could just be overwhelming. Another psychological cause can be mental illness. Now, I know that in some people's videos, they're claiming that mental illness is mental illness, and that mental illness is not art block. However, I'd like to disagree with that. Personally, I do think it's related because creative block is actually a symptom of depression and anxiety. It's actually a major component. As I'm sure most of you know, depression and anxiety can cause you to lose interest or be fearful of things you used to enjoy. And I think as soon as you start sitting down and time after time after time after time, drawing just makes you anxious, it makes you sad, it causes emotions that it shouldn't. I think that's when you can kind of be like, well, I used to love to do this, and I think that you can then couple it with mental illness if you do know that you have depression or anxiety or anything else that causes those creative blocks. And if you don't, I'm not saying necessarily that you do have a mental illness if you feel like this, but it is a really big symptom of depression. For a lot of people, art is a coping mechanism, and without coping mechanisms, especially healthy coping mechanisms, our brain can kind of it can overheat, I guess. It can just like get too stressful. So the age-old question, how do you get rid of art block? The thing is with art block, or really any sort of mental block, it's gonna be difficult to get rid of. And a lot of these things that I'm gonna say, they might not work, because when you're in a mental block or a creative block, you aren't thinking how you normally would. So I could say, well, just draw anything. You could literally draw anything. But that's, at least for me, that's not how you think about it. Like, yeah, I could draw anything, but I'm not thinking, oh, well, I could draw this door that's in front of me. I could draw my room. I could draw my cat. I could draw whatever. I could study figure drawings. generally that's not what's going through your mind, and even if it does cross your mind, it's not generally going to cause the stress of the situation to go away. So these are some things that I think can help get rid of art block, but it might not work for everyone. Take a break, long or short. If you are stressed out from drawing, take a break. Just don't worry about it. I know it's going to be tempting for you to just worry about it the whole time when you're taking a break, but try really hard to just get away from it and to not think about it, whether you need to play a video game or anything like that. Just take a walk. I have down here, take a walk, get some fresh air. Exercise is a good one, especially for us artists that maybe are professional. We sit a lot, and maybe we just need to get up and start exercising a little. Eat or drink something, take a nap, and then come back when you are well rested. So my next point is don't expect perfection. This is a big one, and it really can hurt people and causes a lot of art block. Don't expect yourself to be perfect. Remember why you started drawing. Don't worry about ugly drawings. Everyone has ugly drawings. You get to choose who sees those ugly drawings, whether you show them to everyone or you show them to no one. It doesn't matter. We all have them. Allow yourself to be vulnerable and fail and learn from it. Failure is not necessarily a bad thing. Failure is just part of life, and it's how we learn. The next one is, if you're able to, draw with friends or draw while watching an artist stream online. Sometimes, especially if we're the only artsy friend we have, or we're not around our friends and we're not able to draw with them, if you can, definitely do it, because then it's always a fun time. Then, you can always watch an artist stream online, and then you kind of have that sense of community, even though you're not necessarily there with them in person. If you have a deadline, getting rid of art block with a deadline can be hard, because a lot of the time, deadlines can stifle our creativity, especially if it's something that we're creating for someone else. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that we don't want to create it for anyone else, or we don't want to create art for anyone else. It just means that maybe it's not necessarily what we would have done. So it's a little bit harder to get into. So if you have a deadline, you can always ask for an extension if possible. Don't be afraid to ask for more time. The worst they can say is no. Though do make sure that you explain yourself and be ready for, maybe a little bit of negativity. But ultimately, the worst they can say is no. Even if they can extend it by a couple hours or a day, at least it's something. Another is work in many shorter intervals with breaks in between. This is a common workflow where you maybe work for 20-30 minutes and then you take a 5-minute break. That way you're not kind of overloading yourself. I know we sometimes all get into the groove and we got it going on and we're ready to do that, but especially if you're in art block where you're not feeling that mood, working in those 20 or 30 minute intervals where you're going to get that 5-minute break to kind of chill out and rest, sometimes it helps you kind of just move things along and get things done. Alright, I think that's everything that I wanted to touch on. So if you guys have any opinions on this subject or anything that I said, make sure you leave a comment down below. I would love to know what you guys think. And of course, if you liked this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up and hit subscribe so you can see my next videos when they come out. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.